Should I do a read-in?
Well, let's introduce Daniel Green.
Oh, sure.
Daniel Green is a YouTuber, and if you haven't checked him out on YouTube, you absolutely should.
It's just Daniel Green.
Daniel Green, and what generally, I mean, you talk a lot about the Wheel of Time, but other fantasy works as well. What's sort of the focus of the channel?
Finding the best fantasy content out there and promoting it, getting people to talk about it, getting discussions going. If I really don't like a fantasy book, I typically won't even review it because I don't want to kind of waste people's time dealing with that. I want to bring you guys the best content. I'll, promote that stuff and only mention I'm getting my channel linked multiple times and only getting, the people who really are, just expanding the best fantasy, I guess is the way to put it. Having people really enjoy that.
So that's why you talk about the Wheel of Time so much, because it's just the best fantasy out there.
I was trying to find a way to smartly say that without saying it directly, but you beat me to the punchline of what I was trying to set up there, but all right.
Well, the setup was so good, I had to spike it. I'm sorry.
There you go.
There's so much to explain, which is something Seth and I have realized more and more as we've been doing this and trying to work on other projects. Like, there's just so much to talk about in regards to the Wheel of Time as opposed to many other, I don't want to call them shallower fantasy series, but, whatever. Not 10,000 pages long, that's for sure.
Yeah, without a doubt. Not however many hundreds of thousands of words, if not millions.
Someone's made a count.
I think it's millions.
I want to say 4 million, but I'm pulling that number out of thin air. I think I've heard that somewhere.
There's an infographic floating around somewhere on the internet. I'm not going to find it right now, but...
Yeah.
So people are wondering, what's a couple other novels you've looked into besides Wheel of Time?
Well, I've infamously reviewed King Killer negatively because I did not enjoy that, so that's probably the most controversial I've done. But the reason I still did that one was I knew it was so loved and respected, and I still made the point to say I really liked the writing, it just wasn't my taste. Of course, I've done Game of Thrones, Dresden Files is one I like promoting, and I'd say Witcher is currently the series I'm in the middle of reading that I'm enjoying the most.
That's interesting. What didn't you like about King Killer? Just because it's so popular, but you didn't like it?
No. If you watch the reviews, I just found a lot of cringe in it, and it just bothered me in some ways for that reason. My original review, I was too harsh. I kind of put up another review where I said, I respect the author's writing style. I do admit he is one of the, in terms of his voice in the page, he's incredibly impressive. But there was just story elements that I did not enjoy, and that's about as far as it'll go.
That makes sense to me. Honestly, my favorite part, or favorite book, I should say, was The Slow Regard of Silent Things, which is like an aside story. It's not even about... The main character doesn't even appear in it. And I just liked it. It's from the perspective of, oh my gosh, it's been a while, Aria? I forget her name, the crazy girl. It's from the perspective of the crazy girl. And so the narration's kind of weird anyway, but just his writing style is so beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm very willing to admit that, and I made that point repeatedly. And here's the thing, I'll even go as far as if Patrick Rothfuss starts a whole nother series, if he picks up something else, I'll be first in line to buy it. Because it's just the plot in King Killer I don't really enjoy. Everything else about him as a writer, I think is really great.
That makes sense to me.
And that's why I think The Slow Regard of Silent Things is such a great side novel for him, because it's him really showcasing his writing style without really trying to do any significant plot whatsoever.
Yeah, and because it's from the perspective of a crazy person, like, the plot almost doesn't matter. A lot of the time she's, like, hell-bent on doing some tasks that don't make any sense at all to the reader. It's just his description of the world through her eyes that is very pleasing to read. It's only like 200 pages.
Yeah, it's a shorty. And my complaint about Patrick Rothfuss when I got to the end of his novels was, okay, I really enjoyed those, but I have no idea what happened plot-wise. Like, there was no, like, forward progress. So I agree with you. I would actually be on the side of complaining about King Killer Chronicles. I find it pretty overrated.
The plot of the first two books so far is a guy aggressively stalks a girl and has a lot of sex, and apparently very good at it for his first time. And that's about it.
Said no one ever.
I mean, maybe if you have memories from a past life leaking through, but that's about it.
Yeah, I'm not gonna tell those personal stories here and now. I don't know you guys on that level.
Not yet, but
not yet.
Wait till we flick the recording off and there's no evidence.
There we go.
I wanted to ask you one more thing about Why YouTube? Yeah, I mean, of all the mediums to pick, I've got a face for podcasting.
I like that you asked that because I was kind of wanted to ask Daniel just how he got started, because the more I'm talking to you now, Daniel, the more it kind of sounds like you wanted to do something really similar to what me and Seth were doing, but on a totally different medium. And of course, we're totally focused on the Wheel of Time, but to find these great novels and just talk about them in greater detail.
So I'm going to say some things that could aggravate some fans of mine here. I wish I could say like I started YouTube because I had to do it and it was destined at the time. My original major in college was digital communications, and for a class project, I needed to start a channel and upload something and try to get it views. I did that. It worked, and I didn't stop. That is how and why I chose YouTube and how I got going from there. And then I realized,
assignment.
it's a class assignment. It's probably the best class assignment I ever had from my favorite professor.
There's nothing wrong with that. When Seth was like, "Hey, let's make a podcast," and I was like, "Okay, like a geeky project we can do on the weekends or something." And then we did the first couple of episodes, and I was like, "That was kind of good. Maybe we should keep doing this." This is yeah, it's been once or twice a week since then, pretty much.
How long have you guys been doing this?
Year and a half, just over a year and a half now.
Ish, yeah.
Very cool, and you've done an amazing job. You've got an incredible following for only going a year and a half.
Late April will be 2 years. Jesus.
I love that Jesus God time.
Weird.
But yeah, the other answer to that question is why I started specifically doing fantasy books. I'm a big ass nerd, and it was what I really loved at the time. If you actually look, my first video is about sci-fi because I'm just as big a sci-fi nerd as I am fantasy. But I kind of got a following of sci-fi people or fantasy people, so I just stuck with it, and it's been fantasy since then. I've tried to do more sci-fi stuff, but the audience has responded to that with indifference.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's funny that not everything, we've had the same experience where not everything I put out there is received. People are like, yeah, we're just not interested in that. And
Okay.
you're like, yeah, that's fine. I get it.
I'd love to do like a 4-hour video going over Ernest Hemingway because he's my favorite author. I think he's incredible, and I think his simplistic writing style has this beauty to it. But I've done a couple Hemingway things, and I ended up just deleting the videos because they got like nothing. And the people who did show up were just like, I've never read his books. And I was like, all right, there's not an audience for this. Got it.
And so since you had that sort of major in college, was it communications? Media?
Digital media.
Digital media. Is that where you learned to make YouTube and make it, because I think your videos are super engaging and fun to watch, which is hard to achieve, especially in a headshot review type situation, because I've seen a lot of those videos and you do a great job.
Sure. Do you know that saying Star Wars was saved in the edit?
Yeah.
I have a theory that every single YouTube video ever is saved in the edit because it's all about getting better at editing the video, making the cuts work right. Because if you look at someone who just starts, who is just getting going, their edit style is a little clunky. It's harder to watch. It's not as engaging. And getting that editing style, getting it so you have a fluidity to what you're doing really matters. You don't want to be jump cutting every 3 seconds, things like that. That's a mistake I made back in the day a lot. I used to record, and if I messed up, I'd stop recording and start again because I wanted to do one take, and that, oh my gosh, I'm never going to try to do that again. A lot of things like that. And I also, before I majored in digital communications, my original focus was in rhetoric. And I love public speaking, giving speeches. For one of my finals, I had to give a 15 to 20 minute speech, and I ended up talking for 16 minutes with no prep whatsoever. I got a B-. I'm proud of that.
That is impressive.
So I just talked about Andy Kaufman, one of my favorite comedians of all time, for 16 minutes. And I think it was a little Kaufman-esque to do it completely on the fly. And, I'm excited for, I love rhetoric. And also YouTube allowed me to keep practicing that skill. And so every video I put out is a little bit of a public speaking trial and error experiment for me as well.
I've got to agree with the show saved in the edit. I think the podcast really does get saved, polished in the edit. We've gotten better at doing less retakes and less repeating ourselves and stuff like that. But certainly in the beginning, we record for an hour and a half to get 45 minutes of content. There was a lot of cutting.
Oh, yeah, it's a lot tighter now.
Yeah, it's much tighter now.
Yeah, I had a similar experience. It used to be 45 minutes of footage. Now it's 14 minutes, and I get a solid 10 out of that versus
Right.
45 and getting 7.
This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Your hosts are Seth Jacobson and Patrick Heiler.
Hi, I'm Seth.
And I'm Patrick. Yeah, we actually brought Daniel here today to talk about Chapter 9 and 10, but right now we're doing Chapter 9 of The Shadow Rising. Decisions. And our symbol is the Lanfear symbol.
The moon and the stars.
This is kind of a longish one. 3 days passed with heat and damp that seemed to sap even the Terran's strength. The city slowed to a lethargic walk, the stone to a crawl. Servants worked nearly in their sleep. The Majir tore her coiled braids in frustration, but even she could not find the energy to rap knuckles or flick ears with a hard finger. Defenders of the stone slumped at their posts like half-melted candles, and the officers showed more interest in chilled wine than in making their rounds. The High Lords kept largely to their apartments, sleeping through the hottest part of the day, and a few left the stone entirely for the relative cool estates far to the east. On the slopes of the spine of the world, oddly, only the Outlanders, who felt the heat worst of all, pushed on with their lives as hard as ever, if not harder. For them, the heavy heat did not weigh nearly as much as it did the hours rushing by. Matt quickly discovered that he had been right about the young lords who saw the playing cards try to kill him. Not only did they avoid him, they spread the word among their friends, often garbled. No one in the stone had 2 pieces of silver in hand would say more than hasty excuses while backing away. The rumor spread beyond the lordlings. More than one serving woman who had enjoyed a cuddle now declined too, and 2 said uneasily that they had heard it was dangerous to be alone with him. Perrin appeared all wrapped up in his own worries, and Tom seemed to vanish by sleight of hand. Matt had no idea what occupied the Gleeman, but he was seldom to be found, day or night. Moraine, the one person Matt wished would ignore him, instead seemed to be there whenever he turned around. She was just passing by, or crossing the corridor in the distance, but her eyes met his every last time, looking as if she knew what he was thinking and what he wanted, knew how she was going to make him do exactly what she wanted instead. None of it made any difference in one respect. He still managed to find excuses to put off leaving for another day. As he saw it, he had not promised Egwene he would stay, but he did.
I guess the first thing I want to talk about is just how weird of a chapter this is.
It is a weird one. But we do get a lot of maybe a bit of confirmation for Matt being pulled into Rand's Taveran web here, where he wants to leave, is trying to think of reasons to, but he can't manage it somehow over and over.
There's definitely that, but I guess what I'm saying in the weirdness is that we're not actually seeing it from this chapter from one person's perspective. We switch perspectives so many times, and it's more of an overview review. This is where things are right now before the Trollocs attack.
I think that's probably exactly what's happening, but I did notice that when I was going through, that it doesn't have the solid perspective gaps like it usually does.
And it doesn't even have a solid perspective, which is very, very weird for all the other chapters leading up to this.
Yeah, it's probably just kind of here's where everyone's at, here's what they're doing, and then Chapter 10.
It's funny, I found this to be one of the most ominous chapters in just terms of the vibe I got. I remember the first time I read it, it felt eerie.
Well, it keeps repeating this 3 days thing, and it keeps making you think, like, what's going to happen at the end of these 3 days? Like, clearly things are going to change.
I feel that. It does kind of feel like a lonely and empty come to mind. I'm not sure that's exactly right, but
I'm not going to say like horror movie vibes, but I don't know, more like the beginning of Shutter Island when everything's just kind of off vibes. That's oddly specific, but I'm going to go with it.
Yeah, like a calm before the storm. Like the water retreating before a tidal wave. Things are quiet and slow, but they're about to get fast and violent.
So from Matt's perspective, we have a bit more on just like what he's been up to, which is a lot of trying to gamble, although nobody will hang out with him anymore because they're all freaked out by him. And he We get a little bit in his mind about him walking all the way down to the Great Holding and just looking at it and then turning around, walking back.
In terms of going down and checking out the Twisted Stone Terangrial?
Because it's on his mind.
Yeah. I'd have to be the biggest bloody fool in the whole bloody world.
Well,
yeah, you will be.
It's peak frustration for Matt, because he's one of the few people who hasn't embraced that this is his destiny yet. I mean, I think Perrin at this point is pretty, all right, I'm in. Matt's still, I could leave, He still has that if maybe kind of thing. And that it's self-inflicted frustration because he's just not willing to double down.
I might argue with you on the Perrin issue. I think Perrin, he accepts that he's part of the Ta'veren twisting, but at the same time, he's the last one to accept his duty as a leader and as a general.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think he wants to have himself there for Rand. That's what I mean. He's accepted he needs to be there for Rand.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like that's what he's committed to. And he's so committed to it, he's willing to push the woman he loves and try and fail to manipulate her out the door.
Yeah, which we see a little bit of that on this next page here, where we see a little bit of Perrin's perspective. He's wandering around and he sees Matt gambling, but Perrin's not gambling, walking around in these seedy taverns looking for rumors, something to feed to Fail so that she'll go after an adventure other than this adventure.
It feels a little bit like the beginning of The Simpsons, where like they keep running into other characters, and then you follow the next character, and they run into the next one, and you follow that person. So this is just constantly branching off stories.
Oh yeah, that's basically what's happening, isn't it?
Where Matt's forced out into the taverns to gamble because no one will gamble with him in the Stone, and while he's there, we run into Perrin, and then we see a little bit of Perrin's perspective, and he runs. And then we go into Egwene and Nynaeve.
Perrin's perspective. He learns a lot about the news. There's a false dragon, Mazrim Taim, who apparently has been captured, but nobody's sure.
I mean, I want to talk a little bit about his relationship with Fail.
Oh, sure.
That's what I was thinking we were going to probably hit on here.
I mean, he's kind of doing what Rand does, as in trying to force the people he loves away from him because he's afraid they're going to get hurt.
Yeah.
He's like, it's just the weird thing where he's totally avoiding her. He's out in the tavern, not telling her why he's out in the taverns, but doing it for her. And it's this whole back and forth where, like, it's a very odd behavior to me.
He's doing this and hiding it, and I totally highlighted. He had never been good at lying, so he put her off as best he could, and she began to give him long, silent, slanted looks. Just kind of a throwaway line. We don't get much more on it from Perrin's perspective, but she's like, why are you avoiding me? But she's too proud to act needy enough to say, why are you avoiding me? I
actually think Robert Jordan did a really good job here of capturing the feeling of a relationship that's going through these problems. I mean, I don't know about y'all. I've been in a relationship where like one solid sit down would probably solve a lot of the issues, but Perrin's just being too Riversy, and he's too stubborn to do that. And Fael's culture, they clash in a very realistic way that I think actually kind of, it feels real. It feels like this isn't a manufactured conflict. It actually fits the characters really, really well.
Yeah, it's a very believable problem to have. Poor communication. That's like most of our problems.
And the deception at the core of it. Perrin's trying to find something to, he's not going to lie to her, but he's trying to bait her in a way that's, I would say, it's not a lie, but it's manipulative, it's deceitful, it's...
Ooh, the classic break up with me so I don't have to break up with you. A little bit.
I don't even think there's anything that would work, though. I don't think he could find any rumor that would pull her away from him.
Do either of you think that any of this is Fael trapped in Perrin's Ta'veren web, or is she just in love with him?
I would say both.
What ratio? What's the ratio?
Yeah, I think it's both. I mean, I think she got pulled into his web when she encountered them, certainly, in the beginning. But she put herself in that. She noticed things and jumped in. She didn't have to join them. I think we always say, she stared at him right from the beginning, and I think it was always because he had a nice set of shoulders.
Yeah, I'm a bit more split on it. I think she does love him. Like, I think that's legitimate. But I also think Ta'verens are going to kind of, the people who are going to benefit them the most, the pattern's going to weave around them. And I think if he wasn't a Ta'veren, maybe she would have just thought that guy's cute and then not done anything about it. She would have behaved like a normal person rather than stalking him in the night like she did when they first met.
Oh, right. Yeah, I kind of forgot about that.
Totally, she follows them. It's hard to really know what is like, well, what happens if your luck and Taviran nature pulls the perfect girl in front of you and makes her fall in love with you? I mean, is that she's just the perfect girl for him, right?
And I think he's perfect for her as well.
Exactly. If they communicate every once in a while.
They figure it
Which
out
they
eventually.
get better at.
And when you think about it, I mean, what does it take them like less than a year to figure it out? That's pretty good.
That is pretty good.
A year to figure it out in very, very drastic circumstances.
Yeah, maybe the pressure helps.
And a good chunk of that year, they're not even together.
Oh, right.
Oh, yeah.
And I love these little paragraphs about all the rumors and how they get things wrong and what's actually going on. All the rumors about Sean Chan and
For the Sachin?
Shawchin, Hawking himself being there, which he was.
I really like how Robert Jordan doesn't let you forget about them. Every time there's a period where the Sean Chan are like not mentioned, not showed up, there's something. There's a little nudge that these people will be a problem and they will be back. Or wait, they haven't. Yeah, they'll be back. Sorry.
Yeah, that's a good point. He does have a way of using the rumors that characters hear to remind you what's going on in the rest of the world.
And do brilliant foreshadowing.
Oh, so good.
Yeah.
I think, if anything, he's the master of foreshadowing.
I say that again and again, and people who haven't reread the series, I try to convince them. I know it's a big task to reread it, but it's a whole nother series upon a reread.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And we've said this podcast is for rereaders. This is not, this is Wheel of Time spoilers. It is spoiling things for everyone who's already read the series.
In episode 1, we talk about the last battle. So...
Yeah, and so that's why sometimes it's hard to convince people to start it, because you're like, all right, so you're going to want to read these 14 books, and then you're going to want to read them again. And people are like, I don't have that kind of time.
I'm really proud of my dad. He started a couple months ago. He's already on book 8, I believe, and he's killing it. I'm proud of him right now.
Nice.
Now I got to convince him to do the reread, but he's getting there.
For me, the reread doesn't take much convincing, because people get to the end of the 14 books and go, what do I do now? And you're like, well, start over. And you're like, oh, okay.
Do it again.
and when you're like, there's so much good foreshadowing, especially in The Eye of the World, that usually hooks people.
The best foreshadowing is it's not necessarily foreshadowing, but with the context of who a Shemael really is, going back through the series and having the interactions with him again, it's a whole other ball game. The dynamic is entirely different. Everything that happens is just on another level. Because when you first read it, Shemael's confusing and weird, but with context of everything, the relationship there, it's just wow. And it makes sense why he was kind of just playing with Rand for so long instead of actually taking him seriously.
There's so many little nuggets like that. But yeah, that's one of the bigger ones. I liked here, so we get a little bit about Moraine and Egwene fretting over the Black Aja and the stuff they've gotten from them, and like, is this a false trail? Is it a trap? Like, any of this could be real or not.
A little bit of information about Tenchiko and what's coming.
Yeah. And then she has the thought, Matt was still in the stone. Obviously, he really was growing up and learning about responsibility. Except he can't leave even if he wants to.
The only thing I wrote next to that sentence was, yeah, right.
Right, based on the assumption that his actions are voluntary, which they're not. And then we see Aviendha and Egwene's like newly developing relationship. They're about to spend a lot of time with each other, and it turns out they like each other right off the bat.
I love their bromance. They get along great. They have great chemistry.
Yeah. They're very much two students under the same teacher, and they sort of have a competitive, cooperative relationship.
I've also just found that, like, every Two Rivers person who makes friends with an Aiel, their stubbornness and their, like, morality line up so well, I just believe their friendship. Like, it's just, like, these two cultures blend well.
I mean, you've got Gaul and Perrin, Aviendha and Egwene.
Aviendha and Rand.
Rand and so many.
And Rand and Ruark,
sure.
is sort of the way I think of it there. And then,
we can think of a lot of examples. Fail,
Ban, and Gia. Not really Two Rivers, but...
I'll go ahead and say Rand and Aviendha, the lowest hanging fruit there.
I don't know how well they get along, honestly.
Pretty good sometimes.
It's my kind of relationship.
Once she stops being guilty about betraying Elaine, they get along way better. But a big portion in the early portion of the relationship, she's feeling really guilty for loving Rand when she promised Elaine to protect Rand from having any women love him.
I've said this before, and I will say it again. Avienda is the character who should have gotten more screen time, in my opinion. I think she is awesome, and that she's kind of like, she never gets first person a whole lot. It's her and Logain that I wish got quite a bit more, and just don't.
Nodding. I like that Sanderson gave Logain, he gave both of those characters more time in the last couple of books.
Yeah, for sure. And that I wish that was more prevalent throughout the series. Avienda and Rand's dynamic was my favorite of any of the three, and they got so little time together.
Me too.
I like Min most as if I had to pick a favorite girlfriend of Rand's, I'd pick Min. But the dynamic, I think, is the most interesting between Avienda and Rand.
Yeah, I like what Min does for Rand a lot. She shapes him as a person in drastic ways, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, he needs someone there for him so often. Like, I feel like they get the most screen time, Min and Rand, as far as a couple. Would you say they're together the most out of the three?
Avienda and Rand
far.
are together for a long time as well in the Waste, but they're not as a couple.
That's true. They're antagonizing each other basically for the most of that time.
I would go as far as to say is Rand and Min are the only two that really have a relationship. Him and Elaine have like a crush fling. Him and Avienda have like an extremely sexually charged, frustrating thing.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he loved all of them, but him and Min have a dynamic. They have a real bond. It felt the most real out of any of them by far in terms of actually being developed.
Totally. And they just feel comfortable with each other. And I always I see Min in that way, not to make her a smaller character than she is, but that Rand really needs her and the comfort that she provides, just her being there.
And I come back to Rand's three inheritances, right? He inherited his Aiel personality from his father. He inherited a noble bearing from his mother, and he was raised as a shepherd. And each one of those sort of personalities is essentially paired or is matched with one of the women.
Yeah.
And so, this noble inheritance gets to be with Elaine, but that's more of like a noble fling, like they do it for babies. It's very much like rulers of state who don't get to spend a lot of time together and just like sort of have a relationship in public. And then you've got the battle relationship with Avienda, where of course he's constantly fighting with the Aiel woman. And then he's got this like shepherd sort of homestead farmhouse relationship with Min.
Homey comfort with the girl that was a farmhand before she started traveling with her group, or a horse hand.
Someone just made a comment that I gotta respond to, because it's something I felt for a long time and never vocalized because I didn't see anyone else ever say it, and I thought I was alone. Apparently not. I thought Matt and Elaine had a ton of sexual tension and were totally going to hook up at some point. I thought their bickering back and forth was going to result in that, and I was going to be like, oh, it's no longer a love triangle. It's like a love triangle with a line off one of the points. But it never happened. I was a little disappointed. I thought that was going to happen.
Kind of reminds me of the Spaceballs dynamic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Someone just said Matt has sexual tension with a lot of people. That is very, very, very true.
I guess, yeah, that's also true.
Well, and I always liked the Egwene-Perrin matchup.
Really? I always just saw them as really good platonic friends, but...
Yeah, but I really like their relationship in the forest, the way they help each other, like, that just sort of mutual respect that they have, I feel like would blossom into a really good relationship if they went that way.
That's true. It's just Perrin knew at the time that like Rand and her were going to be a thing, and I don't think Perrin would ever cross that line. Matt totally would. Matt's a dog; he'd do it. But Perrin would be like, "No, like I can't." Matt would be like, "All right."
But that's why they're friends, is because essentially Perrin thought that Egwene was going to marry his best friend. If that wasn't on the table, I think their relationship would have been totally different.
Oh, sure, and that's really early on. That's when they're still just days out of the two rivers. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I also really liked that Matt and Brigitte never did hook up. I thought their friendship was really nice, just having Matt have a platonic female friend who he gets along with. I really
who
enjoyed
also
that.
could maybe kick his ass.
She totally could.
And they get to hang out and talk in the old tongue and like swap stories about like battles from 800 years ago.
I cannot wait to see that in the show.
I hope they do the old tongue. Do you think they'll actually do it?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you. I absolutely do.
It wouldn't be too difficult, really.
I mean, that's what actors are. They're like speak made up languages all the time. Like that's Klingon, Orcish. Like the
Yeah, just
Totally.
memorize this couple of lines here.
Unfortunately, the Old Tongue's not like Tolkien's languages where they're fully out there. You can learn them, but I mean, bring into the screen. All the dialogue you need is in the books. You don't need a full language. Just
The Old
go with
Tongue
what's
isn't
there.
complete.
And I'm sure they could round some stuff out if you wanted to add. I don't think it would be too difficult to add words to the library. I'm also wondering if Jordan didn't have a more extensive library than he let us see.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure there. Have you heard how many notes he had? I'm sure the language is in there somewhere. It's just never been released to us. Because if you look at the New Spring graphic novel back photos and stuff, they actually have like the alphabet in the Old Tongue and everything. It looks really cool.
Oh, I didn't know about that.
Pretty neat. I'm telling you, the New Spring graphic novel is worth it just for the stuff in the back. Like the actual graphic novel is great, but the letters back and forth, the Old Tongue character descriptions, they're really great.
Back to Elaine and Avienda
Yeah.
talking in the bathtub, which is seems to be one of the most frequent places that women hold conversations in these books, is either in the bathtub or in the sweat tents.
Yeah. Avienda likes the openness of being skin bare. She likes to know that people around her don't have knives. That's what I took away from it, I guess.
Oh, that's a good point. That it's like this honesty of like, I'm not hiding anything and I don't have any weapons on me.
Yeah.
Yeah, Egwene notes that Avienda quickly. She thought Egwene felt awkward because she was the only one that was naked. So she just strips and sits on the floor next to the tub because she won't sit in chairs.
As someone who has been naked in public, that is not the case.
I like that about the Aiel. I like that it doesn't have to be this big deal.
There's a lot of cultures in Wheel of Time where nakedness itself is not vulgar.
It's like sex and sexuality that they find, even the Aiel find, that's private. But nudity is not really taboo.
Well, and I like that the sea folk and the Aiel's views of nakedness are very different. Like, the sea folk, it's okay to be nude around your own people, apparently. While the Aiel are just like, what's up? Like, tits out, let's have fun. Like, there's a difference there.
Well, with sea folk, it's just topless. It's not necessarily like, I think if you took your pants off, they'd still be scandalized.
Oh, okay. I
Maybe.
don't remember that in detail, but yeah, probably.
I just thought the women don't wear tops generally.
That's what I thought, is like, you're a sailor. You're out at sea. Like, you wear your pants, but you're barefoot and bare top.
And there's got to be some like Shipley reason that Robert Jordan came up with to justify that, right? Like,
It's not an uncommon cultural thing. There's in our world, some cultures are just like, well, boobs are chest is chest. It's not really a sex organ.
Everybody's got nipples.
yeah.
For feeding babies, and that isn't vulgar.
Is that the title of the episode? Everyone has nipples.
Even the chosen have nipples.
Well, hold up. Ishmael was like a being of fire for a minute. Did he? I don't know his whole makeup at that point,
But I always thought it was just his internal organs were changed. Like, he still had a skin, a human skin,
Okay.
And
so his orifices are filled with fire, but he's good besides that. Okay.
Because we see a lot more. I don't know if you guys wanted to go over any more of Avienda and Egwene's immediate misunderstandings, but they're kind of the Aiel wetlander tropes. Like, one is that she won't sit in a chair. The other is nudity, which we definitely talked about. But the third that I kind of liked that we haven't touched on yet is that Egwene's thinking or telling us that Avienda finds it strange that they don't just kill Berlan. Like, oh, you have a problem with this woman? Well, fine.
or at least beat her up. Like,
Just challenge her.
yeah.
Best to do it with a knife so that it doesn't come up ever again.
Right. Or, I mean, I can do it.
Does she actually say go as far as kill, or is it only fight?
Oh, she definitely says kill, so you don't have, like...
Yeah, best simply to challenge and kill her.
Okay, well, Avienda goes hard,
Yeah,
She's from the mean streets of the Waste, and
Yeah,
you gotta respect it.
Death is a way of life.
I dig it, kind of, in a totally brutal, metal way. Nynaeve preparing meals for Lan. Egwene notes kind of badly. She's not a very good cook at all.
Nynaeve did not know very much about it.
Cute. Elaine not being present at the questionings because she's busy hanging around Rand when every possible moment.
This is sort of the 3 days when they really form their like, of the twice they get to actually interact, maybe 3 times they actually get to hang out. This is the first.
Oh, yeah. I'll read this little part because I found this particularly cute. She, being Elaine, even entered a sort of conspiracy with the Maidens of the Spear. They seemed to know every hidden nook in the stone, and they let her know whenever Rand was alone. They seemed to think the game was a great sport. So she kind of, Maidens of the Spear, once again, when I think this is what happened with Berlaine, when she was like, he called me? And they're like, yeah, go ahead, okay. They're doing the same thing with Elaine, where they think it's funny to let Rand be ambushed by these women who are competing for his attention.
Hunters.
Yeah.
Let's just be honest. The Aiel's culture is always more fun and right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's something that feels really good about it. It was my first tattoo was the Aiel Shield and Spears chapter heading.
Love it. I haven't gotten a Wheel of Time tattoo yet, but I plan on it. I'm just not sure which yet.
Let's do it. Are you going to JordanCon?
Yes, I do plan on going. Hopefully I can schedule everything right, and I'm hoping I can bring one of my friends as a makeshift security just in case, but it'd be great.
Oh, good. Well, we'll be there, so hopefully we'll run into you.
Yeah.
That sounds awesome. Can't wait.
I like that she gives, this is Rand's more lessons on how to rule from Elaine.
Yeah.
Because he's been getting it from Moraine, but, you know, it's one thing when a parent figure tells it to you, and it's another thing when a peer teaches you, and I feel like he learns a lot from Elaine that maybe he already knew, but...
That's true. The vibe's different, although the advice is probably as good. Moraine's like, here's what you need to do, and Elaine's like, consider this. You know, it's different.
I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent here, but this is why I actually do believe they love each other. It's the reason Jordan states Elaine loves him. It's the I taught him things and he actually listened and really respected what I had to say. You can fall in love with someone with that real fast. If someone is really picking apart your brain and you're really teaching them, and you already are interested in that person, that can quickly form a love. And I really like that from Elaine. That to me is not shallow. That is a real, because I'm sure she's been sheltered and kind of there's been she's never really had the chance to teach anybody. So that kind of first teaching of him, I don't know. I just found it adorable.
No, I'm nodding at that.
That makes sense.
Well, I think Sanderson really reiterates that when they come back together and are talking about the battle and making final plans for the last battle, and just how much they have a mutual respect for governance and treating the people right. And I think it's not just the fact that he's listening and learning, but also, the goals he wants to accomplish. They both care deeply about taking care of the peoples of their nation.
And I have a little part to read from Egwene's perspective on her observations about Rand. I think this is all from her perspective, isn't it? She's just summing up what's going on around her from all these other...
From Elaine's perspective?
Egwene. It was Egwene thinking about Elaine.
See, I think it's just we're going from head to head to head to head. I don't think it's any one person's perspective.
Well.
Yeah, that's it.
I mean, yeah, I think here Egwene's thinking about the other women, but then, she thought she loved him for those two things alone. Well, that's in Elaine's head.
Oh, geez, yeah. So, it does switch to her perspective.
Yeah, we're totally switching perspectives multiple times. We hit almost every major Two Rivers character in this chapter, which is why this is a tangent-filled episode, guys.
Actually, I'm going to drive right through that. It was more of Elaine and forming this bond over talking about leadery things.
I wanted to read something that Fire Phoenix posted in the chat about Sean Chan going topless in the sea.
Yeah?
Women remove their blouses when no land is in sight, a reference to Polynesian seafarers. Prior to contact with European missionaries, Polynesian women were bare-chested and wore a wrap-around skirt.
Oh, well, that makes sense. I always kind of saw them as Polynesian.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Also, it was Sea Folk, not Sean Chan, as the chat is very much so emphasizing.
Did you say Sean Chan?
I may have.
He said Sean Chan.
I may constantly swap those two.
He meant Sea Folk.
Yeah.
In my Wheel of Time summaries, I did that for a whole episode, and boy, did I get flack for that.
In one of my earlier ones, I did Taim instead of Tam. And I got grilled.
In your defense, Robert Jordan's names being so similar does not help with the volume of characters.
No. And then the fact that there's not necessarily a right way to pronounce some of the names, there's some overlap, I think.
And there are characters with the same name.
What did we come up with a while ago? It was Captain Domon met a Domani Domine. Domon meets a Domani Domine.
We got Barrelon, Barrelane.
Yeah. Well, that's an easy one.
For you.
Well, I mean an easy one to slip up.
Oh, yeah.
That's one syllable.
One of the Shan Chan beasts shares a name with a character. Lopar. That's right, Lopar.
Oh, yeah.
Lopar is a character name, and it's one of the Shan Chan beasts.
The next thing that I have to read is the little scene where Rand threatens to hang the High Lords 2 by 2 until they start just following his instructions without...
That's something I'd love to talk about.
This is kind of longish. Just want to warn you guys. Rand stared at Mylan and Sunamon, then tossed the thick bundle of large vellum sheets at them. A treaty, all neatly scribed, lacking only signatures and seals. It hit Mylan in the chest, and he caught it by reflex. He bowed as if honored, but his tight smile revealed clenched teeth. Sunamon shifted from foot to foot, dry-washing his hands. All is as you said, my lord dragon, he said anxiously. Grain for ships, and 2,000 Terran levies, Rand cut him off, to see to proper distribution of the grain to protect Terran interests. His voice was like ice, but his stomach seemed to be boiling. He nearly shook with the desire to pound at these fools with his fists. 2,000 men, under the command of Torian. The High Lord Torian has interest in affairs with Mayene, my lord dragon, Mylan said smoothly. He has an interest in forcing his attentions on a woman who won't look at him, Rand shouted. Grain for ships, I said, no soldiers, and certainly no bloody Torian. Have you even spoken to Berlain? They blinked at him as if they did not understand his words. It was too much. He snatched at Sidene. The vellum in Mylan's arms erupted into flame. With a yell, Mylan hurled the fiery bundle into the bare fireplace and hurriedly brushed at sparks and scorch marks on his red silk coat. Sunamon stared at the burning sheets, which were crackling and turning black, with his mouth hanging open. You will go to Berlain, he told them, surprised at how calm his voice was. By tomorrow, midday, you will have offered her the treaty I want, or by sunset tomorrow, I'll hang both of you. If I have to hang High Lords every day, 2 by 2, I will. I will send every last one of you to the gallows if you won't obey me. Now get out of my sight. The quiet tone seemed to affect them more than his shouting had. Even Mylan looked uneasy as they backed away, bowing at every other step, murmuring protestations of undying loyalty and everlasting obedience. They sickened him.
I have a question for you guys. Do you think that threat was just a bark, or there's bite behind it? Do you think he'd actually do it?
I think he'd do it.
I think he understands that if he threatens to do it and then doesn't do it, he'll undercut his own authority, and then they'll never do anything that he says.
I mean, if you come back to the Aiel, there's that one...
That's exactly what hopped into my head. We were talking about it the other day.
The Aiel man who kills a wetlander for having Aiel tattoos, the dragon tattoos.
Mangan? Iridia?
Rand says, if you do that, I'll hang you. And he ends up hanging him.
Mm-hmm. I just think there's a bit of a difference between hanging someone for capital murder versus hanging someone for disobeying you. There's a difference there, I think. Granted, Rand actually liked that guy. He doesn't like these people. It's just, I still, at this point in the series, I see Rand as incredibly stressed. I see him as a farm boy still who's trying incredibly hard not to be. And that threat to me, I don't want to say it rings hollow, but I think it's something that if he did follow through with it, it would haunt him forever.
I totally agree.
I don't think Rand's the kind of leader who would just kill someone for disobeying him.
I don't think he would want to, but I think he really wants to get his point across, and he really wants the Terrans to come around to his way of seeing things, which is just like a more fair and equitable society. And he's kind of, the way Rand sees it, at least, coming from his culture, these are really basic things to ask from your leaders. Like, don't indiscriminately kill and rape people. One. Mm-hmm. And Rand's like asking these very simple things, and the High Lords are hemming and hawing, and so he's morally disgusted. But he also knows he has to leave soon, so what happens when he goes? Does he lose all the ground that he took? He's either, if they won't be reasoned with, then he has to scare the ever-living shit out of them.
And I disagree when you say these aren't, crimes. It's just not obeying him. These are capital murders that are happening from a lack of food and overtaxation, and these nobles are destroying lives, and they are as devastating as any direct murder.
Because, right, they're Terran. This is their land and their culture, and this is the way they've been doing things. So I I got to acknowledge that Rand's coming from a different place with different morality and a way of looking at the world, and he's forcing his worldview on them. He's making them do it whether they want to or not.
That's a really interesting. We're actually about to get into like a philosophical debate of is murder versus indirect murder, which is worse, and
I'm not pro rape and murder. What I'm saying is that these guys are, they are,
yeah.
and it's hard to make them stop because they do hold all this power.
I mean, we've seen the torture chambers in the stone that they've used with abandon.
Yeah.
And then, but even beyond the rape and murder that they do, just the fact that they are diverting supplies and not supplying grain to starving people is essentially, is a lack of action murder, is delaying help for somebody who needs it, who then starves to death. Is that murder?
I personally, I believe yes. I think these people are monsters, and Rand should have just hung them outright. That's just me coming in. But
fair.
I find it interesting that
it may have gotten things done a bit quicker. Just killed them all, replace them.
I find it interesting that he, as a farm boy, still has that disconnect. So I think an experienced leader, like if you put in Elaine in his shoes at that point, I think Elaine would have been much more heartless towards them. I think she, as a experienced ruler who loves her people, if she saw these people doing this, she at least would have locked them up forever, thrown them in a hole, they're gone. Rand still tries to give them a chance.
But I also don't think she would have resorted to yelling in their face and saying, do this or I'll kill you.
She wouldn't have done that because she would have just put him in, I think, in a cell and thrown the key away. I think it would have just been, all right, you're gone.
And we see Rand get more clever with that sort of manipulation, especially in Cairhien.
Tom is helping him a lot here, too.
Tom is helping him a lot. We see him show up at High Lord meetings that they were trying to hide.
They're having
from him.
secret meetings, and he just walks in, just checking in, seeing how you guys are doing.
I kind of imagine a Pulp Fiction. Sorry, did I interrupt your concentration? Just like Rand walking in because he doesn't have a gun that he's putting in their faces, but he's a channeler, which is essentially the same thing.
Yeah.
He's a possible crazy channeler showing up to your meeting that you thought was secret.
Say no tax cuts again.
No, I fully believe at this point in the series, if Rand did not have Tom, he would have failed outright. He would have not succeeded and just become either a puppet or outmaneuvered. I think it's pretty much outright stated that Tom is saving his ass here for the entire book.
Well, Tom and Moraine.
Yeah, both of them together.
Yeah.
I think Moraine's doing as much, Tom states her methods are different, but she's just as effective.
And the Rand not trusting Moraine dynamic, it's one of Rand's biggest failings in my mind. He has a very hard time not seeing Aes Sedai as Aes Sedai and viewing them as people, which you can't blame him for entirely, but it is one of his biggest flaws, and it haunts him throughout the series. He cannot take the veil because he has a fear of them. Of course he does. That's a fair fear for him to have. But Moraine could have been one of his greatest assets.
And Moraine does not do a great job in the beginning. She's trying to browbeat him and manipulate him. She does a better job as an advisor trying to help him towards the end of her run. And it takes her too long, I think, to figure out how to support and help Rand.
And all her little mild deceptions, for lack of a better word, or just lying by omission, some might call it, where Moraine just isn't keeping Rand up to date on what's about to happen. That would really frustrate me too. I don't like the idea of well, we're leaving the city now. No, you got to explain to me where I'm going and what I'm doing. I'm not just along for the ride, man. I'm, living my own life here.
Yeah, I mean, Moraine's not perfect either. She still has that Aes Sedai arrogance, I guess is the right word, about her, where she will consider her word to be law almost. And so it's not entirely Rand's fault. It's just the both of them needed to reframe how they see each other, but it's not in their character too, and it works.
There's another good example of the kind of qualities that make the characters feel very realistic, like real people. It's believable that Moraine might be so kind of haughty and above it all, and believable that Rand would be stubborn and not want to listen to her based on zero information except her just kind of demeanor,
It's the flaws that make the characters.
Yeah, because they're human beings and they have ego.
Right, and they, we always think we know stuff about stuff we really don't know anything about. Or believe we know everything,
And it's funny that that's kind of both Moraine and Rand's biggest flaw. Is both of them just, no, my way or the highway very often.
Yeah.
So here's my question. Is Rand's temper tied to his madness, or is it separate things?
I think it's Two Rivers' stubbornness. I think it's a little bit of that.
I think it's a little bit of that, but well, we were talking about this a lot in one of the more recent episodes because there's this, right, the creeping madness. We talk about this all the time. Like, when is he mad? When is he sleep deprived, constantly harassed, constantly under attacked? And like, where do all those things come to? Like, where does the madness begin? And like, he hasn't slept in 3 nights, and someone just tried to assassinate him yesterday. Like, because just one of those is enough to like give somebody a little temper. But when you put them both together, it's hard to, later it becomes much more clear that, okay, this is just madness. It's not stress.
I fully believe his madness ebbs and flows with his circumstance. I think there's a kind of balance of light and dark that's more madness, less madness. I mean, because previously, even in the series at this point, he's done some stuff that, okay, that's madness. Making dead bodies kneel to you at a fire, that is madness. Like, that is not a sane man. Versus when he's more in control. I think there's kind of I think Rand is, because when Nynaeve finally looks at him, his head, it looks like a thing that's been battling it out. There's this web that is just incredibly intricate that she can't even begin to touch. And I think it's something that's been affecting him less and more depending on the circumstance.
I like that idea. I don't know that we've ever really come out with anything quite like that, but that, as opposed to, because I always saw it as kind of a slow march forward, and like, right, the black slowly covers over the madness slowly covers over the whatever slowly over time. But that makes a good deal more sense, that like sometimes he is more in control and sometimes he's way less.
I see it a little stock market-esque, where you see there's like dips and jumps, but the trend line is always
right.
going
It's
in
moving
one
up,
direction.
but
Yeah.
not steadily exactly.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
But back to the original question in terms of his anger right here, I think none of it's madness. I think he's in good control right now, and I think the anger is purely a farmer looking at the type of nobles who have done horrific things to people of his class, and I'm sorry, there's going to be just some immediate resentment and anger, and Rand's justified. I mean, these people are, in modern society, where they would be considered the worst of the worst. You know, they're the King Henry VIII equivalents,
Yeah.
and he's got no patience for them.
I actually disagree. I do think some of his anger, the fact that he can't control it, I think that he is, in fact, losing his mind a little bit, and one of his early symptoms is an uncontrollable temper. You know, so I fall down firmly on the LTT is a construct of Rand's head and not related to anything real, which is a whole nother argument. But, you know, what I see Rand doing is sequestering the mad, angry person in his head into LTT.
Yeah.
And then Rand stops becoming as angry, and he puts all the anger on this voice in his head.
I'll push back on that idea just because, you know, I like to look at Rand as a person. And right now, in the last 2 months, he's been through more than any person should go through in a lifetime. He's probably not sleeping well. He's not in the best headspace just as a person right now. There's more pressure on his shoulders than any human being in real life Earth has ever had to deal with. And he's having to deal with what he sees as an incredibly obvious thing. Feed people. Don't murder. Don't rape. Be a good person. And these nobles just are being rats. And I think he's just, there's such little fuse left. And I think it's just he goes off easily. Because, I mean, we've all felt that way. You know, I'm sure you've been cut off in traffic and you say some things that a normal person
totally
should not say.
And plus, you're locked in a glass box, you know. Nobody can hear you yell.
I think he's in that glass box all the time now. Because there's just, you know, he's the Dragon Reborn, and he's an 18-year-old kid.
Yeah.
20. Sorry, at this point, 20. No, I don't think the anger is madness. Maybe it is, but I just think I think it's a madness of a sort that's not related to the taint. I think it's the madness of his situation.
Yeah. I think it's a blend more than anything else, but
Okay. Fair.
It's a spectrum, and exactly when things fall on one side or the other, it's really hard to tell, and something we're constantly debating.
Oh yeah, we're debating a semantic, or I guess semantic's not the right word, but something that there's no right answer to.
Exactly. Which, I mean, isn't that the fun part of Wheel of Time, is it has some things that don't have correct answers?
Yeah, and if we had an extra hour, I'd love to get in with you about the Luce Theron Telamon construct theory, but let's move on.
We'll come back to that.
Let's go away.
I keep wanting to talk about that, but it's like totally in not until book like 5.
Last week I put that on the patron-only episode list of things to do.
Odd. I always found that to be an odd choice of bird. That's all I'll add to the conversation.
Heron?
It is like a kung fu thing, isn't it? That's the way I always kind of saw it. Like,
yeah, to me it was strange.
I guess, I mean, Fisher bird suits the
Fisher King?
Right. A blue heron, right? I'm Googling a picture right now because
I'm not sure it's blue. I also think kind of herons as having like really long, sharp beaks that they use to spear fish, and that's sort of very much like a sword.
We have someone coming in saying that the blue heron symbolizes reflection, and if that's true, that's a wonderful choice of bird. It's just before Wheel of Time, I had never seen herons put up on a pedestal of any sort, so when I first encountered it, it was like, okay,
a heron.
Cool.
That makes sense.
Let's go with that. I saw some great fan art like a year ago where it was like a comic where it was like, why is the heron what they use, and it's like it's the only bird with a long enough neck that you could use it as a sword, and then it just showed like a guy using a heron and hitting someone with it. I thought it worked.
If you stretch it all the way out, it's pretty. Yeah, it could work. Beak's pretty sharp.
Yeah,
I'm gonna read this part. He turned his hands over, looking at the heron branded into each palm. He examined them so often that he could have sketched every line perfectly from memory. The prophecies foretold them. Twice and twice shall he be marked, twice to live and twice to die. Once the heron to set his path, twice the heron to name him true. Once the dragon for remembrance lost, twice the dragon for the price he must pay. But if the herons named him true, what need for dragons? For that matter, what was a dragon? The only dragon he ever heard of was Luce Theron Telamon. Luce Theron Kinslayer had been the dragon. The dragon was the Kinslayer, except now there was himself. But he could not be marked with himself. Perhaps the figure on the banner was a dragon. Not even the Aes Sedai seemed to know what that creature was. You are changed from when I last saw you. Stronger. Harder. He spun, gaping at the young woman standing by the door. Fair of skin and dark of hair of eye. I can probably skip her description. Celine, he gasped, hurrying to her. Where did you come from? How did you get here? I thought you must still be Kyrienne, or... Looking down at her, he did not want to say he feared she might be dead or a starving refugee. And of course we see the silver belt and all her hair ornaments, which Daniel, we suspect, are, if not all, some are items of power. She's always wearing the belt.
No, I don't disagree. I figured they were. I figured they were. I'm just sorry.
I probably didn't need to let it hang that much.
Sure. Well, I think one of the theories we always had is that because she's always younger looking, she always has a mask of mirrors on, as well as that sort of like passive attraction, and that she may have ter'angreal that maintain that sort of like subtle Lanfear is so hot plus.
Also, I really wanted to bring up, this is in the next couple of lines here, that this is the first time we see it, and I had forgotten all about this, but Lanfear goes from, like, Rand's age to, like, a mature-looking woman, and she, like, the air glimmers, her appearance changes, and we were speculating about that a ton earlier on in the books, and I forgot that he literally sees her do that. She doesn't look like what you think she looks like. She's the most beautiful woman in the world because she's wearing the Mask of Mirrors all the time to suit you.
She pulls a T2 Liquid Terminator on.
Yeah.
I always thought it was a similar description the way they talk about Elaine and Morghese. That sort of Elaine is this young beauty, but Morghese is this woman in the full flower of her maturity and beauty. And that the Lanfear that you see is sort of the young one who matches Rand's age. And then
Celine is the young one and kind of Lanfear. When she finally reveals herself, she's like, here's what I actually look like. Still gorgeous, of course, but not like a 18-year-old girl, which I assume she picked to appeal more to a 20-year-old boy, you know.
So belts.
One line in particular I wanted to talk about here was, for some reason, though, she did not affect him the way she had.
Oh, yeah, I saw that as well.
And just in terms of our previous discussion, I thought that maybe she either has one of her Terangrial turned off, or that the channeling he's done has lent him some protection from the low-level compulsion that makes her attractive.
That's what I'm thinking.
Oh, I always just took it as he loved Elaine now, so I'm not gonna try to be with you. That's all I ever took it
No,
as.
that's probably...
No, I mean, fair enough.
That's actually a really good point. For some reason, like the fact that he's making out with Elaine...
he's, getting lots of attention from women. Maybe it's suddenly no longer quite as novel.
Now he's the big bad dragon.
And maybe that's related to the mark she's talking about, that mark of love or whatever. Somehow that mark of Elaine has been protecting him.
I think she's being more metaphorical there, but I'm not entirely sure.
That was my question, is what does marked mean in that context?
You're talking about this line, "You have been marked," she smiled wryly.
I'll take a theory that I think maybe she's reading his emotions somehow. Maybe she's just trying to figure out, and she just feels like, oh, he's got a crush. Okay, that's cute. I'm going to squash that and take him from here.
I just don't know if she even knows that he's canoodling with Elaine at this point. I feel like she's so angry at Avienda when she finds out Avienda slept with him. Can't imagine she wouldn't be furious with Rand for making out with Elaine in the hallways.
Yeah, I mean, I see a big difference between kissing some crush, as probably she might see it, versus having sex, but, it's again, this is something that is never clearly answered by Jordan.
Nodding.
As to what exactly is happening between Elaine and Rand right now, or what
Lanfear knows.
What Lanfear knows or thinks of that.
Yeah, and what she thinks about his relationships.
Oh, someone posted a link where apparently it's answered. Man, your people are on point.
Oh my god, They're no
awesome.
idea.
We're actually not that good. They just tell us what to say.
On a bit of a tangent here, I really like how Robert Jordan subtly shifts the power dynamic between Lanfear and Rand every time they meet, because she kind of meets him at different stages. And at first, she's totally in control. And here, there's a bit of pushback. And then, until the last scene, which I don't know full spoilers, you've talked about the last battle, where he just totally crushes her. I kind of like that slow build that happens. It's a great representation of how Rand is maturing as an adult.
He's been marked by Ishmael, or the mark, the stab in his side. And then there's the herons.
There's also the talk about the fact that she sort of bit Rand and gave him the letters, and it looked like that had some maybe compulsion over him until he burned the letters, and that may have broken the mark that she left on him. But that doesn't seem to account for him being marked some other way.
It's too vague to really get anything out of this.
Let's just admit it's Robert Jordan being ominous as hell, and it works because we're talking about it this much.
Totally. Well, it's rare that there's a comment like that doesn't eventually get followed up with some sort of that mark was da-da-da, if you're paying attention. So sometimes we get those little obscure references and try and make a connection that we haven't made.
There's a lot of almost methodical planning to what Robert Jordan answers and doesn't. Mm-hmm. And I think this was one of those things that was just, it's ominous, it's going to sound good, and it's going to kind of reestablish Lanfear's control. When she says that, we don't fully grasp as the reader a first time through what she really is, but it lets you know she's seeing things normal people can't. She's beyond what we're used to.
Yeah.
In that aspect.
And I mean, at this point, if you haven't figured out she's Lanfear,
well, she just told you.
Yeah. But that's... Yeah, Jordan likes to be by the time I tell you something, it should have been obvious at least 4 or 5 times before we got there.
Right.
Obvious, in quotes.
A first-time reader who knows nothing when you first meet her doesn't really know who Lanfear is. You probably think she's some big, bad person, but I don't know. I wouldn't blame someone for not assuming it's a Forsaken.
That's true. It's easy to lose perspective sometimes, having gone through these books
so many times
that, wait a minute, do we have any... How could we could have deduced that she's Lanfear, maybe, or that she's one of the Forsaken by now, almost definitely. But without knowing all of the rest of the series, how many signs do we have for sure that she's one of the Forsaken?
I feel like we find out in The Great Hunt.
Right. She's in dreams, and we know she's something's going on with her, but this is definitely the first moment where she's where it's right out there.
Yeah. I don't know. I love Lanfear as an ominous presence. I like that a badass female villain has such a strong don't mess with me vibe that's not, and she's just, I don't know, she's great. I think she's one of the best villains in the series.
Oh, totally. I mean, he's taken down how many? He's gone mano a mano with a couple of channelers at this point and kicked their butts.
Yeah.
And here Lanfear makes him look like a fool.
She kind of I always got the vibe, she reminds the reader that Rand's a farm boy. Like, that's what her presence did for me here. It's like, Rand's not some badass Neo type at this point. Rand's scared, and he's not entirely sure what he's doing.
And he's only survived by pure luck at this point.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, he can't even embrace the source when he wants to, necessarily.
Excuse me, it's not luck, it's Telviranness.
Yes.
The written in plot armor.
Just discuss how great it is that Robert Jordan just wrote plot armor into his story.
Perfect.
Love that.
I think it's brilliant.
Such a wonderful, because it's in every story, and here he's just like, yeah, these are my main characters. Taviran.
He's thinking, if I reached for Kalendor, I could at least use it as a sword, even if I can embrace the source. And that just shows you how vulnerable Rand really is at this point. And then he's backing away and hits a wall. His back came up hard against something, and he looked around to see what it was. There was nothing there. A wall of nothing, with his back pressed against it. Kalendor glittered not 3 paces away, on the other side.
Just how easy it is to keep him from the object of power when he doesn't have it in his hand.
Yeah.
I like how kind of Looney Tune-esque Rand is being right there. He's like, what? You're not Lanfear. You're kidding. Slowly backing towards his metaphorical shotgun. Like, what?
No way.
Trying to be all slick.
I also think it's how creepy it is that she's like, oh, I wish I'd found you in your cradle. If I'd raised you, you would totally love me and be mine. And I'm just like, whoa, that's creepy as hell.
She's trying to pull an Elvis Presley and meet her future partner at, like, child age.
I didn't even really think about that very hard, but...
It's called grooming. It's something that
Yeah.
people do, and it is gross and creepy.
Much easier everything would be if I had found you then. If I had been free to, laughter faded into an angry stare. Do you wish to see my true appearance? You can't remember that either, can you? And she shows him that she's... Well, I mean,
obviously, she's
thousands of years old.
older.
Yes, so, but she has the appearance of, like, a middle-aged channeler.
Well, and he's totally afraid that she's going to turn into some Agenor Bethamel,
Oh, God.
like, hideous thing.
Because even...
Because she's like, you want to see my true appearance? And he's like,
No.
no. if you've been experiencing the grinding of the wheel like they have, and she's like, no. I was deep. I was in a dreamless sleep. I didn't get ground up the way they did.
Older was not the right word. More mature, riper, even more beautiful, if that was possible. And then, all of a sudden, even knowing what she was, she made his throat go dry, his throat tighten. Do you think that's just...
raw animal attraction?
Yeah. I always wonder now if it's a touch of compulsion or... Because he seemed fine a second ago. But then she changed her appearance and made the wall, and all of a sudden he seems much more attracted to her.
If there's one thing we know about Rand, he likes a woman in control.
Oh, he does, doesn't he?
Yeah, he certainly does.
I didn't really ever put that together. I mean, Avienda and the Lane, for sure.
The
Min's got her
maidens.
shit together. She's in control of herself, but she's no ruler or anything.
She's a bit older, a bit more experienced, and a bit more mature in, like, relationship ways.
Yeah, emotional control. His stomach lurched. Do you mean to kill me, then? The light burn you, I kill you, she spat incredulously. Kill you? I mean to have you. Forever. God, so over the top. You were mine long before that pale-haired milksop stole you, before she ever saw you. You loved me, and you loved power. For a moment, he felt dazed. The words sounded true. He knew they were true. But where had they come from?
All right, 2 things to talk about there. Pale-haired milksop. Rand thinks it's Elaine. He's talking about
Ileana.
And number 2, and you loved power. Old memories coming forward into his head. So that is evidence of the taint in his mind. Taint that causes madness, allowing a pathway for memories from Louis Theron to come forward. It's not Louis Theron saying that. It's Rand's own memories in his head that he's getting from a past life. No, and we know he's being affected by the taint.
Yeah.
I for lack of a better word, excuse the meme talk, I love how much Lanfear is just shook by that, like, to her core. Rand saying, and you love power.
Yeah, the fact that he pulled that memory, the fact that she's like, wait, how did you know that?
Yeah. Well, she responds to it pretty drastically, correct? If you keep reading, she kind of freaks.
Oh, I also wanted to know out loud here that during this conversation, doesn't Lanfear says, like, listen, me and Shaitan, we talked. We've got a plan for you. And one of them is giving him Asmodean as a teacher. She says it right out here.
Yeah, absolutely. Though this is where they form the plan to, well, not necessarily form the plan, but I guarantee she already had the plan.
Yeah.
That,
well, he's supposed to swear to the Dark One.
Mhm.
Then Asmodean will teach him how to channel. He'll take over the world and rule it forever and ever.
and at the end of this chapter, Rand's like, oh, she gave me one of the clues I needed. I think that clue was, you need a male Forsaken. He just wants to do it on his own terms.
But she gives him Asmodean anyway. It's weird to say gives him Asmodean, but that's essentially what she does. He can't leave after the bout in Ruidian.
Right, she shields him and puts him in Rand's possession.
And he can't run because he'll be assassinated by the Dark.
Nodding.
And then I feel like this is a insight into what Lanfear thinks the Dark Lord wants. I'm not sure how accurate it is.
Fair.
Dark Lord. But if there's anything, I think the Dark Lord would like to make Rand Nabliss just long enough for him to destroy the world.
Well, I think that confirmed by the fact that when he fails, he names Moradin. I think that's, Moradin is the Dark One's stand-in for Rand because they're so closely linked. It's his reflection.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would say after the crossing of the streams, they might even be the same person.
In terms of like the wheel weaving, like their connectedness kind of making them one. Yeah.
I think that when they cross the streams, the pattern merges their threads together in order to deal with the paradox of Balefiring Balefire.
Well, we know they're linked in a very intimate way after this. It's one of those things Robert Jordan's just not going to give you a real answer, but you're going to figure it out kind of thing.
But I certainly think that the body exchange has a lot to do with the crossing of the streams. And the fact that their threads are tied together. And then if it's one thread, switching bodies is possible.
Sure.
And then there's the theory posted that people talk about, at what point did they switch? Was it Moradin still in Moradin's body when he pulled Rand out of the cave? Like, you can debate that, and people talk about that.
I suppose it wouldn't literally have to be, would it? Never thought of that before.
Moradin's redemption, possibly?
That's a good question. I always assumed it was Rand pulling Moradin out.
I think it's one of those things that's not directly answered.
Yeah. That's a good question. I hadn't thought about the timing of that.
I would have loved to have Moradin to have been redeemed in some way like that, because I always felt like he was a character filled with regret. You'd listen to especially what he says in Eye of the World when he's still pretty mad. He's so remorseful.
It is possible to talk with him, meaning the Dark One. Go to Shael Ghul, into the Pit of Dune, and you can hear him. You can bathe in his presence. A different light shone on her face now. Ecstasy. She breathed through parted lips, and for a moment seemed to stare at something distant and wondrous. Words cannot even begin to describe it. You must experience it to know. You must. She was seeing his face again, with eyes large and dark and insistent. Kneel to the great Lord, and he will set you above all others. He will leave you free to reign as you will, so long as you bend knee to him, only once, to acknowledge him. No more than that. He told me this. Asmodean will teach you to wield the power without it killing you. Teach you what you can do with it. Let me help you. We can destroy the others. The great Lord will not care. We can destroy all of them, even Asmodean, once he has taught you all you need to know. You and I can rule the world together, under the great Lord, forever. Her voice dropped to a whisper, equal parts eagerness and fear. Two great sa'angreal were made just before the end, one that you can use, one that I can. Far greater than that sword. Their power is beyond imagining. With those, we could challenge even the great Lord himself, even the Creator.
So the beginning, I think he's talking about the true power the way a junkie talks about drugs.
And something having to do with being in the presence of the Dark One. There definitely seems to be something there, although we don't get a ton of first-person perspective.
Don't we see Demandred experience the direct glory of the Dark One and communicate with him? Maybe Samuel as well?
Yeah, we see a couple of people go to Shael Ghul. The only scene that stands out in my mind is when the corridor is tall enough for Shaidar Haran, but it's not tall enough for whoever he's bringing there. I can't even remember who. Sindane?
It happens a couple of times.
It's a female channeler.
Yeah, I think that's right. I can't even remember
It
now.
might be Moghedian. She's being punished.
That may be
Oh,
right too.
that's it.
Well, yeah, I just like that little bit because it was so dark and strangely sexy. Can I say that?
Sure.
You can definitely say that, and I appreciate it.
That's why Lanfear makes such a good villain.
Mm-hmm.
And the way she's talking about everything Rand can gain from this relationship and how good it will be for them, and then for him, and then it slowly turns to them, and then it turns to her. She's talking about herself at the end. You can see where she's just full of, not malice, but she's jealous for power. She wants everything. It's all she really wants, but I think she doesn't believe that she can do it without LTT or Rand. She can't do it without the dragon. So she needs this. He's the key to ruling everything.
I think Lanfear falls into one of Robert Jordan's greatest strengths, where he takes an existing trope, the evil, sexy woman who's a temptress, and he redoes it, he upgrades it, he makes it something that's deeper and better. It's something he does throughout Wheel of Time just incredibly well, and I think Lanfear is one of the best examples of that kind of respect he plays to classic fantasy while also ushering in like a new style, a new update.
Yeah, and she is a really complex character. I don't want to sum her up in a sentence or two. She has plenty of opportunities to take Rand out. She could have killed him a million times already, but she doesn't. Partly because I believe her. She does really love him on some level.
Kill you? I mean to have you forever.
Yeah. She's like, no, I wouldn't. I don't want to get rid of you. I want to own you.
But there's no way to work with him. It's a dominating relationship.
She threatens Rand a little bit at the end, where she says, like, listen, you can do this willingly, but if this keeps going like this, I'll just turn you.
Yeah, I can get 13 and 13.
Yeah.
I don't think she wants to do that because it would change
me neither.
Rand from being what he is.
Does it have to be 13 male channelers?
No.
It could be either.
Because the males couldn't link in a circle.
So it has to be 13 women
13 women and 13 Murdral.
channeling through the merge.
Although I think at some point when Taim is turning all the men, he says they can add men into the circle
yeah.
to reduce the number of women.
Is it even a circle? Like, do they have to be linked?
I know there has to be Murdral involved as
Yeah,
well.
I always thought it was a circle of Murdral and channelers. So, I mean, we talked about this before, that Murdral are essentially corrupted channelers, right? The proportion of Murdral to the population of Trollocs is the same to channelers to the population of humans. And so I often think of Murdral, and a lot of their abilities comes from basically a corrupted human channeler. And so I would think that they are in some way brought into the circle in the same way that a channeler is brought into a circle.
Seems like there's actually a little bit of debate about this, about the sex of the channelers, and as opposed to the sex of the person you're turning.
And so I guess what the canon is saying is that if you're being turned by someone of the opposite sex, it's harder to resist. So it's better to turn the male with a female channeler. It's easier, but it's still possible if you have a male in the circle.
I also find it interesting that depending on the person being turned is varying degrees of difficult. And I've always wondered, what's the cause of that? Is it just the person's, is it their grit, or is it how deep in the light are they? Is it, what causes some people to be harder than others? Because I think it's, was it Logain, who they try to turn him for like ages and he just won't go. So I wonder how hard it would have been to turn Rand if, Logain's difficult.
I mean, part of that was they'd already exhausted some of their best channelers, turning a bunch of other folks.
Oh,
but yeah,
okay.
But it definitely was like a force of personality and stubbornness. I think Rand would have been very difficult to turn.
Yeah.
But I think that was partially why they put him in the box.
Imagine trying to turn Nynaeve. Even worse.
Yeah, I don't know if that'd be possible.
It depends. Can she pull her braid? If so, that's like a restart button. And
headcanon, Nynaeve cannot be turned. She's the only person.
Aradia makes a good point that, like, Morghese, I bet, would be hard to turn because she has such a strong will.
Yeah.
Even though she has very little ability to channel. But, like, we see her able to break free of Ravine's compulsion.
Even though she doesn't even know what's happening. But there are some moments. I still keep rethinking that scene. I love that scene where Matt's in the palace in Camelin, and Morghese says, Matcham Cawthon, tell my daughter I said these things. And then she says a bunch of things. And right at the end she says, and tell her that I frequently look back on all my pleasant time sitting with Shiriam in her study. Tell my daughter I said that. Badass.
Because no one had a pleasant time at Shiriam's study.
No. And no one in the room would know what she was talking about. Even Matt.
Yeah, someone just said Matt could be easily tricked. I very, very much so disagree. I think he would be very hard to bring into the shadow. I think he might be the hardest even of the... I think he'd be harder than Rand. Just, there's something about Matt and his purity and his tenacity, I guess, that I don't see him ever going to this. I think you'd have to mentally break him.
He is strangely pure is an interesting way to describe Matt. I feel what you're trying to say, though.
He's got some innocence that the other characters don't have because he can just depend on luck to get him out of any situation.
He's boyish in many ways, even though he's the one like doing all the drinking, gambling, and fondling, for lack of a better description. But that morality doesn't necessarily have anything to do with how in the light or in the dark you are.
Yeah. If that was the case, Perrin would be the hardest to turn because he's so morally just
right,
the best possible person. But I think he actually, of the three, would be the easiest to turn.
Yeah, but I think the wolves would protect him. Well, and he's not a channeler. Like, that's the other thing is like Rand and Matt, obviously, Perrin and Matt aren't channelers, so they couldn't be turned.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But if they could, we're going real hypotheticals here. It's just the fact that it's the fact that like Perrin. There's the saying they say in the books again and again, like a reed that bends in the wind versus a branch that snaps. Perrin's the branch that snaps. It would be hard, but you just push hard enough and it'd break. That's
Agreed.
Just the Wheel of Time's kind of philosophy. I would think that would translate.
I can nod to that. You were always stubborn, she muttered. I won't take you, this time. I want you to come to me of your own will, and I will have it. What is the matter? You're frowning. A man slipping in at the doors with a knife. His eyes had slid past the fellow almost without seeing. Instinctively, he pushed Lanfear out of the way and reached for the true source. The shield blocking him vanished as he touched it, and his sword was in his hands like a red-gold flame. The man rushed at him, knife held low and point up for a killing stroke. Even then, it was difficult to keep his eyes on the fellow. But Rand pivoted smoothly, and the wind blows over the wall, took off the hand holding the knife, and finished by driving through his assailant's heart. For an instant, he stared into the dull eyes, lifeless, while the heart still pumped, then pulled his blade free. A gray man. Rand took what felt like his first breath in hours. The corpse at his feet was messy, bleeding onto the scroll-worked carpet, but there was no difficulty in fixing an eye on him now. It was always that way with the Shadow's assassins. When they were noticed, it was usually too late. This makes no sense. You could have killed me easily. Why distract me for a gray man to sneak up on me? Lanfear was watching him warily. I make no use of the soulless. I told you there are differences among the chosen. It seems I was a day late in my judgment, but there is still time for you to come with me, to learn, to live. That sword, she all but sneered. You do not do the 10th part of what you can. Come with me and learn. Or do you mean to try to kill me now? I loosed you to defend yourself. Her voice, her stance, said she expected an attack, or, at the very least, was ready to counter it. But that was not what stopped him, any more than her loosing the bonds in the first place. She was one of the Forsaken. She had served evil so long that she made a Black Sister look like a newborn babe. Yet, he saw a woman. He called himself 9 kinds of fool, but he could not do it. Maybe if she tried to kill him. Maybe. But all she did was stand there, watching, waiting, no doubt ready to do things with the power he did not even know were possible. If he attempted to hold her. He had managed to block Elaine and Egwene, but that had been one of the things he did without thinking. The way of it buried somewhere in his head.
Dog's getting hyped about the chapter.
Yes. It's probably the mailman.
Neighbor's probably coming home, actually.
He could only remember that he had done it, not how. At least he had a firm grip on Sidene. She would not surprise him that way again. The stomach-wrenching taint was nothing. Sidene was life, perhaps in more ways than one. A sudden thought boiled up in his head like a hot spring. The Aiel. Even a gray man should have found it impossible to sneak through doors watched by 6 Aiel. What did you do to them? His voice grated as he backed toward the doors, keeping his eyes on her. If she used the power, maybe he would have some warning. What did you do to the Aiel outside? Nothing, she replied coolly. Do not go out there. This may only be a testing to see how vulnerable you are, but even a testing may kill you if you are a fool. He flung open the left-hand door onto a scene of madness.
So he gets attacked by a gray man, and we walk into the Battle of the Stone, which was started by Samuel, who sent the Trollocs.
Yeah, I believe Samuel sends the first wave of Trollocs, and the second wave that attacks the first wave of Trollocs is sent by Semerhog.
Exactly.
Lanfear just happens to be there. I don't believe that she knows anything about what is about to happen.
I disagree. I think she knew it was going to happen, and she was there to, like, seduce Rand and take him away from it.
No, I think because it's implied she brings in Trollocs to help him, and it seems like she did it kind of as a last-minute thing, like oh, crap, I need to save him. Because, she saved
So
him.
I'm going to have to correct you on that one. It's a common misconception.
Okay.
Because I believe one of the Forsaken thinks that Lanfear brought the Trollocs in, but in fact we find out later it was Semerhog who sent the Trollocs in to help him. It was actually that's a common misconception about this section.
Because she's standing there.
Because she's standing there and someone else thinks that she helped him out, but we find out later it was in fact Semerhog under orders from the Dark One.
I thought it was her until we started doing this. Yes, until we were doing this read-through. It's not obvious.
Hey, I'm more than willing to be corrected. I'm happy.
Oh no, I as well that was something I was corrected on as well, and then I had to go look it up, and I was like, oh yeah, Semerhog says that like she's kind of pissed off that the Dark One made her send Trollocs to help the Dragon Reborn. But this is Lord of Chaos is what they're going for. Let the Lord of Chaos rule.
Yeah. And boy, did they get close to doing it.
Oh, I know. I mean, this is so effective. Like, because he pulls. Well, I often said that Kalendor, it amplifies both the true power and the taint, and when he uses Kalendor, I think he goes much more crazy, very quickly.
Just the more power at once.
It's not just that. I think also he's pulling in more power and therefore more taint, but I think he's pulling in even more taint than that. I think it's amplifying the amount of taint more than the power he's pulling in, because it is a true power or Sangreal without a buffer on it. That's the key part. And the buffer is the thing that would protect him a little bit.
Daniel, do you have any more comments on Chapter 9?
Dude, I'm so pumped for Chapter 10. Chapter 10 is where I'm like, let's go. It's either, I'm either listening to a podcast, a book, or like just my terrible taste in music. So I'm pretty sure they'd prefer me to listening to you guys.
What's your terrible taste in music?
Oh, I go for I've been listening to a lot of Vince Staples, and then I'll bounce over to like Queen, and then I'll bounce over to like metal. I get super moody. There's no consistency. There's no theme. It's just awfulness.
It's like you really don't want people to hit shuffle on your playlist. They'll hear crazy stuff.
Yeah, I mean, my playlist is like some random radio station on shuffle, pretty much.
Right. We have similar taste in audio, because mostly it's just podcasts and audiobooks with the occasional really bad Pandora station thrown in there for me.
I dig it. I got someone happily saying Queen. I love Freddie Mercury so much, and the fact that movie came out, I enjoy, because it's just bringing them back to the main spotlight, and I think Queen should always be in the spotlight.
Oh, yeah, I haven't seen that yet.
I haven't. I'm like a bad fan.
I have heard good things.
Yeah, and Rami Malek apparently really goes deep in, which I always love seeing an actor do that. Have you seen him interviewed, though? He's a strange guy. Like, not in like I'm saying he's a bad person way, just in like his vibes he gives off are weird, but like I like it.
It's totally fair. I feel like he's not normal. He wouldn't get the kind of roles that he gets unless he was had some quirks about him.
No actor who can disappear into a role like that is normal. You know what I mean? It takes a special kind of person to do that. Like, apparently Daniel Day-Lewis had a family member die during filming Lincoln, and he was just like, I'm staying in character. Like, that's not normal.
It shouldn't be. Yeah. It really shouldn't be.
There's this great story I love, though. I think it was between Dustin Hoffman and some classical Shakespearean actor, I forget who exactly, during the filming of Marathon Man, one of my favorite movies. And apparently, Dustin Hoffman, if you've seen the movie, he needs to like appear very disheveled and messed up. So he like didn't sleep the night before. He like ran a bunch and like I don't know, did some other stuff to make himself just appear awful. And then he showed up for the shoot, and the other actor across from him just goes, you can try acting. Just really like that like low key burn of like I don't have to do that because I'm better than you.
Right. I can act. I don't have to put myself in that situation because I can pretend to be in that situation.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, I can see the value in both.
Yeah, it's just two different methods.
I want to talk about Christian Bale, method acting, and disappearing into roles. Oh my God, yeah. I mean, the whole thing. Have you seen or heard of the new Cheney movie that's coming out, or has that come out yet? Yeah, it's Christian Bale as Dick Cheney, and he is unrecognizable in that role.
Well, like half his roles, he's unrecognizable. Like he just goes so deep.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like if you compare like American Psycho and Batman, he's a pretty rich boy. Like that's the same Christian Bale, but then one's a little more muscular, certainly. But there's a whole range that he goes to that's just crazy. He has to be damaging his health.
Yeah, and there's the one movie he did about the housing crisis. I forget what it's called. I didn't think it was him at first. I thought, wow, that guy looks a lot like Christian Bale because his mannerisms were so different and his posture was just off. And he gave himself a lazy eye that wasn't like effects. He actually just made himself have a lazy eye. And then it wasn't until like halfway in the movie I was like, that's Christian Bale just acting his ass off.
Right.
I was kind of wondering about that. We shouldn't go too deep into it yet, but I was kind of wondering about that as Rand is, like, he runs out of his room and starts fighting Trollocs and shit, and then he runs back. But this whole time, Robert Jordan's describing the kind of fluid nature of this battle and how, like, sometimes he's with people, sometimes he's alone, sometimes, like, half his group goes this way, and then, like, some Aiel showed up, and it's just this, like, a fluid kind of chaos. And I was wondering if that came from Robert Jordan's experience. Of course, I guess he was a helicopter gunner, right? So not really on the ground, but...
Well, he must have seen so much from the air, and I'm sure interacted with other things and heard stories. I mean, who knows what his experience was actually like.
Yeah. Well, he wrote that amazing little short thing that I think a lot of people have shared. I know it was shared on the Wheel of Time subreddit, where he wrote that short story or like short little blurb about like killing a man in Vietnam, but it was actually a metaphor for killing the man Vietnam turned him into or something like that. It's a really short thing, but it's really kind of like poetic the way he put it. I can find it pretty quickly.
I think I missed that too, and I definitely watch Reddit, but
it's pretty cool. It's one of those things that just like appears and disappears on the internet, and I've found its original source, and I'm fairly certain it's legit, like most of the way there. Okay, thank you, Nick. You're like literally half the reason I have like any presence here on Discord. Thank you. But yeah, it's funny. I was like nervous when Discord first started for my channel because like things I'm not entirely controlling online, but my community's been super self-moderating. They've all been polite and respectful. It's been pretty great.
I think it has something to do with the Wheel of Time.
Just good people,
Yeah. I
also have little things for like Dresden Files and Witcher and stuff like that, just because there are other series I've talked about quite a bit. But I it's safe to say most of my fan base is here because of the stuff I've done for Wheel of Time.
Oh, totally. And I've said this a lot to Seth, but I feel like, especially in reference to the folks on Discord and people who show up live really frequently and things like that, I feel like they're a self-selected group, which is why they're so nice. These are all people who have read The Wheel of Time multiple times. So I think that takes like a certain kind of person. And I don't want to draw too many conclusions, but it seems to make sense to me that they're kind of like not a bunch of jerky trolls,
You're saying that like people who read Wheel of Time, they're just better than everyone else.
I mean, aren't we?
They're patient.
They're willing to wait for content. They love good quality
for
content.
Years.
They're willing to look into depth and consider other people's perspectives, which I think that last one is the most important.
I think that's true for all fantasy too. That you get to live in someone else's world and see the world through a different world through their shoes or through their eyes.
Boots.
And that kind of you spend all that time doing mental exercises like that, and you're going to be perhaps a little more thoughtful.
I've thought about starting a series where I take some villains from Wheel of Time and basically like exercising the debate part of me here, try to like make videos where I justify all of their actions, try to like really give their side of things, whether it's Cooladin or a Forsaken.
That sounds
whatever,
really fun.
and just try to like put myself in their shoes. Here's why they're right.
Ishmael Moradin would be my favorite. The whole nihilistic approach to life.
Eventually, it's all going to end, so let's just do it now.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?